Chapter 24. Hands folded, Ruth leaned forward in the patio chair. I hear you, David, and your thoughts are convincing, but how do you know what's best? Because I can't say Charlie won't run off again or his suicidal ideas have disappeared. What if he stays and something tragic happens? David dropped his foot from the plastic seat, standing above her with folded arms. You mean like with Damon Moss? The tragedy loomed behind this entire conversation on both their parts. They just differed in their ideas for preventing another loss. I've warned you about your emotional involvement, David, but you've poured yourself out in extreme measures and your enormous heart has formed a bond with Charlie far tighter than with Damon. I've seen the extreme measures you've taken this time, and I'm worried. You're not sleeping, barely eating, you take no time to decompress. What do you think I'm doing out here with my Bible, guitar, and bare feet in the grass? He watched the breeze rustle the leaves of the yard hedge. What made a stillness in his spirit so difficult to achieve? He only sought a moment of rest, a place free of the turmoil of everyday life. He hung his head. Don't worry about me. Save your concern for Charlie. He knew Ruth did her best for all involved, but Charlie was the one whose placement was at risk. If the county worker shipped him off to some institution for gang-toughened teens, David might truly lose his mind and reason for living. Okay, David, fine. Let's focus on Charlie. I'm not seeing improvement. If anything, he's regressed since arriving at Westside. An ache stabbed between David's brows. According to who? Your incident reports. They're increasing, not decreasing. We're not the right fit for Charlie, and you, of all people, know it. David shook his head in disgust. Not even remotely. I'm afraid we're clashing on every point, here, Ruth. Oh? So speak your perfect protection plan, because the stakes with keeping Charlie alive and safe with our limited means run pretty high in my thinking, not to mention protecting everyone else from his outbursts. Her words sliced open the wounds of losing Damon. He folded his arms across his torso, hiding his clenched fists. There's a time to leave the 99 behind and give your all for the one. And if he did, would it clash with his resolve to let go of control? That's your plan? I see you giving your all to Charlie already, yet his issues continue to escalate. Then Sharon better find cells for all the children, since no other way exists to guarantee their protection. Is the house earthquake-proof? What about tsunamis? Emotion welled to overflowing, and he wanted to scream at something or fall on his knees and weep. That's what you're saying, isn't it? If only they could surround each child with a force field of safety. He couldn't deny the desire to guard and protect, but according to his terms, not in some isolation bubble or handing them over to a warden at this place in LA. She held up a stubby finger. No reason to play the rebel, mister. Her accusation deepened his squint from the bright morning rays. We need to fight Sharon on this. No. Her tiny voice barked out the sharp word. Look, I get your point, I do, but pressing to keep Charlie here strains my stance. His therapist called just after 5 last night, wanting to caution us. Only her visit with him stopped him from running away from school yesterday. The point is, he remains a risk I'm unwilling to take, so helping you change Sharon's mind is out of the question. I think. Her expression turned solemn. You think what? He'd rather take it all now. Her stature deflated. You're allowing the situation with Damon to cloud your thinking and judgment. I know you want to prove yourself, but there's nothing you could have done that day. You couldn't leave the other boys alone in the van to go chase after him into the streets. But he should have known better. That was the problem. He knew they'd drive right past Damon's old stomping grounds on the way to the Nickel Arcade, and it proved a traumatic mistake. On that sultry afternoon in May 1996, what made him listen to Damon, Moses, and Miguel declaring an arcade in the air conditioning a better plan than water games in the sprinklers at home? Damon caught David off guard. He never dreamed he'd leave the van while stopped at a red light, run down an alleyway, vanish around a corner as though well aware of his destination. What could David do other than vow to never end up in such a situation again? But how could he prevent another occurrence without training the boys in so tight they couldn't breathe? He refused to shrink their boundaries to the point of restricting growth. Otherwise, any preparation for their adulthood might suffer. He wanted to keep Charlie safe, but was that even the point? Our responsibility is to love. Only God can help his soul. David had to let go of his desperate need to prevent another tragedy. One thing he knew, his fear of losing another young man in his care left him coveting a safeguard beyond his abilities. It wasn't about proving himself. It was about what Charlie needed. Lord, I need answers. Ruth folded her hands in her lap and let out a breath. My lack of conviction either way leaves me of no use to you. However, the option of winning Sharon over yourself remains on the table. Like he won over Ruth? She showed no intention of joining forces with him. Still. I understand. I'll talk to Sharon and explain I'm acting on my own. Fine. I planned on informing Charlie of his departure this afternoon, but I'll hold off for now. It's already brief notice, and he doesn't do well with even minor last-minute announcements. No, he didn't, and David couldn't bear the thought of such a reality closing in. You spoke with him on Monday, right? What does he know? I mentioned our concern with whether Westside is the right placement for him. When I asked his opinion, he remained silent, so I suggested we decide one way or the other based on his behaviors this week. David's heart ached. What could he say to change the county workers' course of action? I appreciate the chance to speak with Sharon before you talk to Charlie. Sure, call and hopefully you'll catch her. Just listen, she continued. No one fights Sharon on anything, trust me. The best strategy is to stay on her good side. She shielded her eyes and gazed up at him. With your handsome face, charismatic smile, and creativity, no doubt you'll charm her into seeing things your way. You're as manipulative as the children, Ruth Whitmire. I'm serious. When has my charm ever worked on you? Was she trying to help? What happened to her convictions against taking such a risk? Maybe his charm worked, after all, luring her into the fight, if only to give him a chance to turn things around with Sharon. I've learned to shield against the impact of your devastating blues. She covered her face. Sharon won't know what's coming. She dropped her hands but kept her gaze at his collar. Had she always done that? She won't notice my eyes over the phone. He wished Ruth had kept such thoughts to herself. May I have Sharon's number, please? And I'm taking Charlie shopping. I'll pay. Whether Charlie stayed or moved on, another day of looking like an orphan remained out of the question. You're a mutineer, David Andrews. Took you long enough to realize. She rose and jerked her head toward the house. Come on. He followed her to the office, where she unlocked her desk drawer and removed the budget box. After working the combination, she pulled out 5 20s and handed him the cash. You're welcome to use the girls' van since they have no travel plans for the day. I'll grab the keys. Thanks, Ruth. They locked eyes. You are welcome, and I appreciate your heart for our boys. And don't you ever doubt that. Chapter 25. David left his 4th message for Sharon at the Child Welfare Department, tossed his checkbook back in the drawer of his scuffed wooden nightstand, and sat on his bed sealing the pre-addressed envelope with his monthly school loan payment. Good thing he had few other expenses since his new cellular plan would slice the pittance he stashed in savings each month. Still, he managed a small cushion, should the unexpected happen. As he stepped out of his bedroom, young squeals poured in below through the front door. Moses climbed the stairs followed by Tommy, Leon, Miguel, and Sean. Hey David. Moses gestured for a high five. David slapped hands with each boy as they passed, no doubt putting away backpacks and getting ready for the pool as instructed. A murmured discussion in the office paused as David stepped into the small space. As you were, gentlemen, he said as his shoulder bumped the red-nosed summer staff leaning against Ruth's desk to reach the outgoing mail slot on the shelf. "Don't mind me." They seemed deep in planning mode before he entered. Something about monitoring Miguel. "Hey, man. There's no space for the three of us." Glenn slapped David's shoulder in a playful gesture. "So how's it going? Miguel giving you problems?" David asked as he turned at the exit to face the guys. "Not if you're taking Charlie this afternoon. Is it true?" Glenn raked his tongue over his teeth, constraining his hope, perhaps. By the window, James slouched in his seat, his smooth native skin sliding along the arms of the chair as he gnawed at his fingernail. "Yeah," David said. "I'm about to give him the news." "Great. Thanks, man," said Glenn. "See any issue with us heading for the pool now? I mean, when do you need the van?" Glenn's face appeared in no shape for more sun. "It's all yours. Say, you might want a hat, and watch that burn." "Yeah, that's what everyone says." Glenn squinted as though assessing the sting of the motion. "So what are you driving?" David held up a bright lanyard keychain. "The girl's van. Ruth worked it out." "Is he?" Glenn's grin flattened. He peeked out the door, then huddled closer to David. "Is Charlie terminated?" The word sent shards through David's chest. "Not if I can help it." His realm of responsibility included anything possible to not only protect but also serve the best interests of the children. Still, he had to stop thinking he held a means to prevent tragedy if only he stayed awake through the night, worked through his breaks, and pressed himself to exhaustion. Westside wasn't a cage of guaranteed safety, but he could serve a greater need, a need for relationship, a chance for hope, to receive truth and love. "Okay, well, it's totally sad to think of giving up on the kid," Glenn said. "It's just, well, he's a handful. I feel for you and John, dealing with him constantly." Both men relaxed their posture as though the idea of Charlie leaving only lightened their load. Were there no other allies rooting for Charlie to stay? The thought stirred an indescribable dread through David's veins, like a slow-acting poison. A slow thud left a hollow sensation between his ribs, and, for a moment, his mind went blank. Fatigue waved helplessness over his senses, followed by chills of impending doom. He closed his eyes. "Are you okay, man?" Glenn asked. "You look exhausted." Somewhat recovered, David offered a half-smile. "I just need good sleep." He tapped the jam. "Have fun swimming, guys," he said, then left the office, spotting Charlie in the kitchen. With his tattered, extra-large slacks hanging near his thighs, the kid plopped his boxer-covered backside into a chair and rested his arms and chin on the table, his backpack and its straps spread out across the center of the floor. If the kid overheard the conversation in the office, how would David explain? He wanted none of this, counted on changing the county worker's mind. Should he keep trying to reach her before saying a word to Charlie, or give the guy a chance to process the genuine possibility of him leaving tomorrow? After ruffling his golden mop, David straddled the chair on the opposite side of the table. "What are you doing here?" Charlie mumbled through scrunched lips. "You're on break." "I'm taking you shopping unless you've changed your mind." Charlie stood and knocked over his chair. "And no." He stumbled back with excited energy. "You'll really take me?" David jiggled the van keys. "Pick up the chair, move your backpack to your room, and we'll go." "Yes." The kid hopped to obey. Had David just given him false hope? Perhaps he should have explained everything, but how would Charlie take it? Such life-altering news might kill the rare burst of joy he'd just expressed about going shopping. When he returned, they walked next door and stepped into the girls' van. Would this be their last outing? David's words refused to form a coherent sentence. How many opportunities remained to voice or otherwise express his heart's desires for Charlie? He took a deep breath, suddenly recalling the point of this trip, to show Charlie how much he mattered. As David started the van ignition, pop music blared out the speakers. He shut it off and backed out. "I want to apologize again for my neglect and not noticing your need for clothes. I hope you can forgive me." Charlie's gaze stayed on the road. "Sure." An awkward silence followed but passed in the short drive down 17th Street and into the parking lot for Ross Dress for Less. Decent clothes were important, but also stretching the budget. Charlie tumbled out of the van, barely catching his balance. In jerky motions, he flicked back his bangs and shut the door as though he'd finished a liter of Coke before they left. "You okay, bud?" Huddled at the van, arms close to his chest, the kid scanned the parked cars, sidewalks, and alleyways between stores, not saying a word. 10 steps closer to the store, David glanced over his shoulder. Visibly rattled, Charlie caught up. Perhaps unfamiliarity kept him glued to David's side, or anxiety left him longing for a comfort zone. But this stretched beyond the everyday fear he often masked with a gruff exterior or isolation. No, his sunk-in posture revealed unease as he nearly walked right into a lady shopper exiting the store with her bags. "Watch out." David gripped the back of Charlie's neck, directing him through the automatic entrance doors. "The boys' section is on the right," David said, knowing the layout from shopping here with other boys, plus the stops for himself, buying extra t-shirts, socks, and boxers to extend the days between washing laundry. Charlie opted for the men's section toward the front, stopping to search a circular rack of pants, and took up a hanger with a pair of large navy and black striped slacks cut and frayed at the knees. David rocked on his heels. "With a big yellow tie and red nose you could join the circus." Charlie's pale, lightly freckled nostrils flared as he turned to another rack with tent-sized jerseys and t-shirts. He appeared focused now, no longer jittery, only excited with the hunt and considering particular styles with greater scrutiny before sliding the hanger over to view the next. Whatever statement he was going for, it was sending undesirable messages. Sure, most kids wore the clownish, baggy style these days, but why dress as though he hung with the hood? How did he view himself? With his tendency to run, and a history of substance abuse, according to Ruth, who read his case file, the challenges for his future thrust a dagger through David's heart. "Since I know the dress code, how about you choose what you like from my selections?" David suggested. Positioned before the dressing room mirror in a pair of Levi's skater shorts and a no fear, teal, white, and gray plaid button-down, Charlie stood 3 inches taller. If new clothes bolstered confidence, how much more if he opened his heart, drank in the freshness of truth, and quenched his thirst with genuine love, a love that pours out, gives, heals, fills the darkness with the light of life. Charlie searched every box on the shelves for a matching pair of Vans shoes his size. David resorted to searching out an alternative and considered trying a different store. Found it. Charlie ran to David holding a box with black and white checkered Vans shoes, size 7. "Try them on. Lord, let them fit." Charlie strolled the cramped space with a bob to his step, but they stayed on his heel. He turned. "They're great. So, can I keep them?" "Yep, they're good," David said, then collected Charlie's old shoes from the floor, stuffed them in the dressing room trash, and handed the empty Vans box to Charlie. On their way to the checkout line, Charlie dropped the box and pulled a black hoodie from an 20 large rack. "I want this." "Really?" David restrained a laugh. "Why not indulge the kid? Go try it on," David said with a bow of consent. Somehow Charlie's old black hoodie ended up on his body again, but off it came as he stripped to his white undershirt while standing before the mirror. A second chance for David to get rid of the old thing emerged, and a smaller, brighter substitute on a reject track caught his eye. Charlie pulled on the sweatshirt large enough for Shaquille O'Neal, looked himself over, then laughed. As he held up his arms, the sleeves flopped several inches past his fingers. The waistband came to his knees. David held up a teen-sized blueberry sweatshirt. "What do you think?" Charlie squinted. "Booyah. With slow punctuation, he read the yellow letters on the front surrounded by colorful shapes. "What's that mean?" "Booyah," David said, with the celebratory inflection of the slang word while ejecting his fingers in a firework explosion. "Oh, sweet." Understanding dawning, Charlie swam out of the massive sweatshirt, pulled on David's alternative, then moved his body to the hip-hop beat playing throughout the store. "Booyah. Can I keep it?" David sent Charlie's old hoodie to join his tattered shoes in the trash can by the dressing room exit. Now the kid only needed a haircut. "Let's check out." He had the cashier scan the empty shoebox and the tag hanging from Charlie's sleeve. She cut off the tag and scanned the other items David laid on the counter. He stopped her when the total crossed the $90 mark. So his savings wouldn't grow this month. Not important in the grand scheme. David ached for their excursion to go on, for the outpouring of time, care, and attention on Charlie to seep in and take effect. From now on, their interactions might prove the most difficult. Chapter 26. Once home, David sent Charlie to hang his new button-down shirts and a thin long-sleeve shirt in the closet and put the shorts, socks and boxers in his drawer. Should they have packed his clothes instead of putting them away as though Westside remained Charlie's permanent home? If only every child grew up with a secure, wholesome family. What stability existed for a child in the system? Startled, David raised his arms as a blueberry form wrapped around his waist. "Thanks," Charlie said as he pressed in for a brief hug. "You don't need to say sorry, 'cause you do more than anyone when I deserve nothing." He pulled away and hung his head before David could squeeze back. Instead, he ruffled the kid's freshly cut blonde hair. Did Charlie view himself as unworthy of even basic human needs? Perhaps not surprising with so little good offered in his lifetime. He worked hard not to show it, but he'd endured desecration, violation, robbery of the fundamental necessities of the mind, body, and soul, given sewer water to quench his thirst for love. Such dry, fractured desperation could drive a kid toward any baited handout to fill the void, no matter how foul or empty the promise. David couldn't watch another teen self-destruct, like Damon Moss, seeking anything to forget a soul-deep hunger, desperate enough to end it all by popping enough pills. David longed to show Charlie the source of genuine love, but only a shriveled strength remained after months of pouring himself out, wasted with the dread of what might come. What hope remained for treating a fractured life with so little time? In his peaceful moment, yesterday, playing basketball, a joy welled as awareness grew. He stood in the grasp of God's will. What greater deed existed? It wasn't so hard. All the anxiety, his racing thoughts preventing sleep, his sense of loss over Naomi, none of that mattered as Josephina's cries broke through the surrounding city bustle, and the strength to race after her, snatch her from harm's way, pumped through his veins. What a wonder-filled demonstration of teamwork with the Almighty, his life lined up with God's purpose. Though concern over Charlie constricted his airways, David set foot aboard Contentment, as though a renowned prince and trustworthy captain thought to call on him to serve as a crewman on his royal ship sailing an all-knowing course through rough seas. What qualified him for such a position, noticed by such lordship? Nothing. Nor had he the right to declare the next right move for Charlie. Whether he stayed or left, might David breathe easier with his almighty God at the helm? When the activity staff returned from the pool with the other boys, David deferred Charlie's supervision into their hands, then headed to his room with 1 hour of his break remaining. After searching for his cellular, he found it in the nightstand drawer with his checkbook, sat on his bed, and pressed a dial. The social services representative answered the other line. "Hi Mary. Can you connect me to Sharon again?" "May I ask who's speaking?" Mary never asked before, but the first 5 times he offered his name and figured she knew him by now. "David Andrews." "I thought so. Sharon had me send a fax to Westside. I sent the message over an hour ago, addressed to you. You'll want to check your fax machine." I'd sure like to speak with her. It was his best chance to change her mind, give Charlie's trial an extension, at least. Tomorrow was too soon to say goodbye, and David still hadn't mentioned the possibility to Charlie. I'm sorry. Miss Taylor instructed not to put you through to her line. I really am sorry. Mary sounded sorry but offered little good. I guess I've proven myself a pill, he said. So much for winning the county worker over with his charms. Thanks anyway, Mary. It's not your fault. He hung up and plopped down prostrate on his bed, arms outstretched. The phone slipped from his hands and thumped to the floor. Somehow, he had to live with whatever came next. You realize Charlie made it through his first day without a major problem? David joined John in the office after the young boys fell asleep in their beds as he read The Magician's Nephew, and the older boys drifted back to their own room. You're right. John perked in the swivel chair as he typed case notes into the computer. You think Sharon will give him another chance? One more week at least. Thursday is too soon. David still hadn't said a word to Charlie about him leaving. John kept typing. Did you get hold of her today? I tried several times. Oh. I almost forgot. What? The paper tray on the machine with the corded phone and printer lay empty. Did you see a fax come in? David asked. I'm expecting a message from Sharon. Nope. Why not just call you back or leave a voicemail? Less easily lost that way. To avoid a direct conversation with the wacky staff worker who keeps calling, that's why. You're not wacky, just committed, aren't you? To Charlie, to West Side. No plan to leave soon and get on with your life. I respect that. Yet John didn't approve. Or he also grieved over their paths growing farther apart. David rubbed his thick brows. I don't see myself doing anything different. This is where I belong. For now, anyway. You're still not sleeping, are you? John swiveled, this time to meet his gaze. If you don't take some downtime, you'll bury yourself. Us moving in separate directions is weird enough without you dying on me. The inevitable breach in their common ground when John married cut in ways David dared not analyze right now. Might he hope to find another friend who meshed with his spirit? Was it wrong for him to consider Naomi? David folded his hands behind his head. I'll ask for an extra day off next week, okay? Maybe take that walk with John's sister after all. Happy now? Happy equals at least a month, but I'd settle for a week. Funny. Like Ruth could approve vacations with no fill-in staff. Though a week in the Sierras sounded heavenly. Since the brief excursion to the mountains on Sunday, the call of the wilderness only intensified. Someday, he'd take off for his favorite bouldering spots near Bishop, stop by Palmdale along the way, and visit with Father Sam. Check on Jesse. Was he still living alone, or was one of his sons home from the Middle East? David needed to keep busy, focus his thoughts on the kids, and soon he'd snap back to his upbeat self. He always did. He couldn't think of vacations and visiting family now. John's eyes narrowed. Not as funny as you think. There are ways. Go to bed before you keel over. I'll finish here. Too weary to ask what ways John meant, David crawled up to his room, hoping this once for actual sleep. He stepped through the door and retrieved his cellular phone from where it dropped earlier on the hard carpet. A page lay curled nearby as though someone slid the paper under his door. Ruth, most likely. He drew up the slick sheet and took a deep breath. The fax from Sharon. Did he want her message now or to save it for the morning? His chest thumped and his stomach turned as he stretched the ends and read past the heading. Chapter 27. Incoming enemy from the rear. Drop altitude, warned old peppy hair of the Star Fox team. With a quick move on the controller, Charlie dropped the plane of Fox McCloud out of range of the evil Andros who shot down his father, who started the team years ago to defend the Lilat system. Good one, Miguel said, his shoulders jerking with each attack. Charlie, can we talk for a minute? David's voice came from behind like a co-pilot sounding an alarm. What did he want? For almost 2 days, Charlie had no problems, not even at school. He gained all the Nintendo privileges he wanted, but at what cost? His gut told him not to care and to forget about David. Whatever the guy said didn't matter. Better to lose himself in the game. Miguel stomped his leg to the floor as though starting a tantrum. Not now, David had. Star Fox found a different battle ending with Andros. I gotta see this. I have the controls in my hands, remember? Charlie said. Why let Star Fox get the glory? I found the ending. And it made Miguel jealous. Whatever. Miguel flipped his hand. Do a barrel roll, came the rabbit's voice again from the TV. Charlie leaned in the direction his ship needed to fly while pressing the Z button to flip out of danger, then returned to attack. With his teammates safe, and his R-Wing powered up, Star Fox just might destroy Andros to avenge his father, and Charlie would win a medal. Will you pause it, please? David's voice still sounded different, and not in a good way, upset or unhappy. No way, man. Miguel's whiny voice cracked. He can't stop. Deep inside Charlie's ears came a thump-thump, like when Aaron stuffed his face in the toilet and he couldn't breathe. Even now his chest worked for more air and he might not breathe again, depending on David's news. He had to know, so he handed the controller to Miguel. Finish the battle. What you doing, man? Miguel pressed the pause button. You gotta beat this. A gentle hand spread over Charlie's head, guiding him out of the game room. Let's step out, David said. Nice and quiet on the patio. What's going on? Charlie's words came out shaky as they passed through the kitchen with spicy food cooking. He sucked drool from spilling out his mouth, then the instant he made it outside, spat in the bushes. David slid the glass door closed behind them, took a seat on the picnic bench facing the plant-covered wall, and slid his fingers over his face. Charlie wanted to pat David's back to cheer him up or something, but dropped his rear on the other end of the bench and hunched forward, elbows on knees. Just say it. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Get it out and leave time for making his next plan for survival. David rubbed one arm as if smoothing out bumps. Normally Ruth explains this, but I asked to tell you instead. Frozen, Charlie forced out the question. I'm leaving, huh? I finally got hold of your county worker and, I swear, I protested until Sharon hung up on me. Is she coming now? It really didn't matter. Not anymore. He could handle it. Better to get it done and over. She wanted to come now, but I talked her into tomorrow. She thinks a home near LA is a good fit for you. We don't want you to leave, but... I want to go, Charlie said, as he stood and flicked his short bangs, not wanting to hear more. It's no big deal, so don't worry about it. I thought we could talk. David blinked wet eyes, leaving a tear on his cheek. It won't help. Talking made nothing better and crying. Charlie rushed inside, tortured by a stinging pulse in his nose. He couldn't help David. And how stupid to care when it only brought weakness. A man comes from tougher stuff, right? Charlie swiped a large, black plastic bag from under the sink, then ran into John's back, making him drop a butter dish on the kitchen table. He set down a basket of muffins and turned. Whoa. You okay? John said. You're doing it wrong. Charlie hated changes. They never put food on the table, only on the bar where they lined up and served themselves. He wanted everything the same for his last dinner. Frustrated, he knocked against John on purpose as he passed, then stomped upstairs. He had failed enough homes to know the routine. Stuffing his new clothes in the black sack, he wished everything was over and the county worker would come right this minute. He was a troublemaker and getting rid of him made everyone's life better. Why wouldn't David admit it? Miguel walked into the bedroom. If I kissed butt, like you, I'd get me my own new threads. Bet you'd dig all the attention. You're such a staff pet, always sucking up. Dude, I'm leaving. So get off my back. Yeah, he liked the attention. While shopping with David, Charlie forgot about the stuff making him mad. He felt normal for a while and fit in his skin. That's all he wanted, to be real and okay with living, and for the moment to last forever. You're an idiot if you go AWOL again, Miguel huffed. Have you seen the new chiquita in the girls' home? He licked his lips as though eating her for dinner. La dama más bella del mundo. He popped his eyes, mouth, and fingers open in one motion. Yeah, whatever. I got kicked out, okay? He might as well run away, except how could he when he just found what he wanted, what he searched for his entire life? It was his fault for thinking this place sucked the same as the other homes. No, that's not true. He noticed the difference right away, but it confused him, made him nervous. Miguel plopped on his bed. Dude, seriously? You mean like terminated? Your lucky day. If Charlie behaved at the new home, maybe they'd let him return. Sorry, man. Freak. Boys. Dinner, John's voice from downstairs interrupted. Miguel shot down to the kitchen, and Charlie followed. We're doing dinner differently tonight, John said, as they lined up by the bar in the kitchen as usual. No more lining up. Take a seat around the table. John placed a pot of chili near a bowl of muffins. Moses flew to the chair near the food so fast, he about slipped off the seat. Why change Charlie's last dinner? He wanted it the same as always. Soon his entire life would change. He held back an urge to throw the food on the floor again. Not that getting in trouble mattered anymore. The sick taste crawling up his throat was better than destroying the hard efforts of his staff to fix nice meals. And he didn't want another thing making David sad. The bright colors and good feelings he first noticed this morning disappeared. What if more changes destroyed the happy place he found here at Westside? He'd lose hope of ever returning to a house he could call home. Fine. If they wanted things different, he'd make it different. He snuck a couple of muffins and tried to slip away to the Nintendo room unnoticed. Hey! Moses said, drawing attention as Charlie passed through the hall. Charlie held the muffins to his chest with one hand and used the other to turn on the TV and Nintendo box. He wanted to stay out of trouble, but they made it so hard. It was Moses' fault and John's and David's. Except for the part where Charlie wanted to get kicked out, thinking he wanted to be miles away from these dorks. Miguel handed a game controller to Charlie and sat next to him with muffins in his hands too. I saved the game for you. What are you doing? You'll get in trouble, Charlie said, unsure why he came, and not interested in the stupid game. Sure, it felt sweet playing the hero, strong as Fox McCloud avenging his father, but no video game made him, Charles Shipley, real and alive, and nothing ever would again. You too, man. So we're in it together, see bro? I thought you hated me. And Charlie deserved it, born to live in the gray nothingness because he was nothing. But he couldn't go there anymore, not after seeing the colors and breathing fresh air for the first time. Where'd it come from? David? He was the one who made Charlie hope, made him think he mattered enough to live in the actual world. But he'd never see David again. Might as well get used to the gray stone of Charn, the land of Queen Jadis. Or was she a witch? Now he'd never know since he wouldn't be here when David finished the book. David stepped into the game room, a basketball under his arm. Okay, you guys, outside. 2-on-1 and try to take me. Chapter 28. David dribbled up the drive, leaped, and made a slam dunk in the hoop above the garage. 2 for me, 0 for you guys. He caught the rebound. Charlie mumbled a word. Need a breather, bud? David held the basketball at his hip, determined to set limits, but he preferred to spend his last moments with the teen another way. Just play, Charlie growled. His vexed tone sharpened the grim expression he had worn since the heart-twisting discourse between them earlier, leaving them both undone. Charlie lurched to catch the ball David passed, still wearing his blueberry sweatshirt, despite the lingering heat. With a bounce to the right, then left, he sought a way around David's blocks to reach the hoop. "Here, man." Miguel waved and maneuvered forward from the side. Before Charlie could pass, David stole the ball with a lunge, dribbled out of his reach, then twisted and made a swish shot. 3-1. Miguel threw back his head. "We know, all right. Stop saying that. Come on, Miguel. Lighten up." David had his game face on, but a weight on his chest squeezed his airway. What misstep led to his worst fears coming true yet again? When he'd pestered Sharon Taylor with half a dozen messages. Or driving Mary with social services crazy with his redials, begging to speak with the county worker until the secretary refused his messages? Ruth warned him to stay on Sharon's good side. Instead, he plowed forward, insulting her judgment for altering Charlie's life without once observing him in his current setting. In her facts, Sharon Taylor wrote she received his messages. His reports were clear. No need for her to see his reasons for Charlie Shipley to stay at Westside. "We're just not seeing the benchmark progress necessary to justify his stay in your limited setting, so the decision for his transfer is final." If only David had left things alone. All his efforts only cemented her determination to pick up Charlie tomorrow and take him to the Alvarado Teen Center in LA. They expected him by 5. No compromise. No postponement until after their 4th of June celebrations. No matter his rescue tactics, David still lost every boy most in need of saving. Okay, not all, but first Joseph, then Damon, and now Charlie. Not that one life mattered more than another, but only the lost needed finding. David passed the ball to Miguel as Naomi emerged from the girls' home next door, leaning with the weight of an overstuffed trash bag. "Hang tight, guys," David said as he ran over to help. He reached for Naomi's load of trash and puffed, out of breath. "Please, allow me." Not that she needed a hand, but a gentlemanly gesture might model a lesson for Miguel and Charlie. She hesitated. Her teal t-shirt with Yosemite in bold print recalled the times she tagged along on trips with her brother to the national park notorious for its mountain-high stone faces, every rock climber's dream world. With her natural climbing abilities and uncanny strength in her high school years, she scaled the 5.7 route at the base of El Capitan with next to no instruction. Only the world's best climbers made it to the top of the 3,000-foot face, but with a year of training and her mother's approval, Naomi could have joined on the 4-day climbing ascent he planned with John, sleeping in hammocks anchored into cracks on the face and snacking homemade go-rup that surpassed good old raisins and peanuts. Just as well her mother halted her from joining their adventures since they called off that climb after David smashed his finger in his tailgate. Perhaps Mrs. Kish thought him untrustworthy even then. The thought of touching her daughter never occurred then, but now. He didn't trust himself. He strained for calmness. "No insult to your competence, just obeying your mother's chivalry lessons." Naomi released her load to David and opened the side gate for him to pass with the garbage bags. She closed the gate behind her, and they were alone. After opening the lid to the can, he compressed the bags, and sealed the top on tight to decrease odor and pest issues. What prompted her through the front yard with the trash, when the trip to the bins was shorter from the back? David's senses jammed on overload, squeezed in by the waste receptacles, air conditioning unit, and a jumbled pile of girls' bikes. His head spun, and he stumbled to the side before catching his bearings. He needed hydration or something. As he turned to flee the tight space, Naomi blocked him with an inscrutable expression. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Her tone hit like water in his face. He rose to his toes for a glance over the fence. Miguel sat on the ball, making civil gestures, while Charlie stood above with relaxed hands in his pockets. No altercation appeared imminent. Still, they flared from cool to a flame without a spark. "Sure, what's up?" He'd watched the two, but her stance insisted he listen. She held out a hand from her hip. Why don't you save your egotistical competition, or display of masculine superiority, or whatever you think you're doing, until after work?" Her arm dropped to her leg with a slap. "I'm sorry?" His neck jerked sideways. What fueled her fury, exactly? He recalled no time when Naomi displayed an angry outburst. Sure, a frown or two when he and John teased her relentlessly, but she always walked away hiding a smile. It's cruel, self-centered, and childish to hog the ball from the children. You're always blocking the guys. Never giving them a chance to shoot. Give them a break. I don't. If you plan on bullying, pick on someone your size. He jolted and might have huffed a laugh if not inclined to cherish the first ever moment Naomi expressed anger with him. What happened to her shy, subdued nature? If she were anyone else, he'd take offense. Though she spoke with accusation, her eyes pleaded for an explanation. She didn't see him as a beast, did she? Should he point out her misconceptions, clarify his intentions? No way. Not in this confined space. Too intimate and unwise with the boys so close. I apologize for offending you. Respectful words, yet safe. Better to leave a sense of division. Let her think he was a selfish, competitive ogre. No virtue in urging a smile from her this time. He should walk away, return to the game with the boys. She stood rigidly. My offenses don't matter. It's the kids that matter. Turning, she then headed for the backyard. He sensed her slipping from his life for good this time, right along with her brother and the little place where their mother welcomed him as family, as though he were her own son, the only house where he felt at home. It's the kids that matter. Naomi declared his axiom and might never know they shared the same heart and intentions, whether or not he rightly modeled his ideals. With a shaky breath, he squeezed his shoulder blades and saw her point. He tailored his games with Josephina the other day so the toddler could win. He wasn't using peak performance with the boys, either, but what drove his actions? She had judged his intentions and took offense. The very idea of bullying the boys into submission opposed David's mode of protection. But were his motives out of whack? The threat of losing ground tempted him to turn in his notice and follow his friend out of here. David unlatched the gate and burst out of the squeezed space. Chapter 29. Unnerved by the encounter with Naomi, David crossed from the girls' home to the next drive, as Charlie tried to kick the basketball out from under Miguel before he slapped his foot away. Though far from giants, they could curse and taunt like Goliath, and feed him to the birds if given half a chance. With Miguel's manipulative games, Charlie's lifetime of horror, and enough anger to show for it, they each possessed a will to take over as the big man in power until someone declared it wrong and drew a line. Miguel was a punk, but no wonder Charlie longed to take charge as others juggled his world. Still, allowing him to run his own program until he left Westside offered no grace or kindness. Young and alone, fending for himself, was a desolate place David understood all too well. He wanted better for his boys, yearned to return their adult-sized sense of duty back to a size 14 and 12, as they appeared now. Charlie swung a touchdown-sized kick to the orange Spalding, landing Miguel on his backside. Miguel rolled over laughing, then scurried up after the ball and brought it back, resuming his seated position. His skater shorts hung so low on his hips it seemed more gentlemanlike to roam around in his boxers. Charlie too. They had much in common, and David once hoped they'd grow as friends, but ever since Charlie moved in they'd behaved like enemies. What brought a connection between them just in time to say goodbye? Weary and tight, David rolled his shoulders and stretched his arms. I think I'll change your names to pull up your pants number 1 and number 2. Both boys took the hint. They didn't want their baggies confiscated in exchange for the straight-legged gym shorts with the fitted waistbands from the donation keeper cupboard. Miguel lifted his gaze. Making Brian jealous? Charlie laughed. So much for the chivalry lesson and efforts to gain order. Why'd their thoughts have to go in the wrong direction? Since you have me all figured out, what do you think prompted me to bring you both out front? David squatted on his heels. I'll give you a hint. It had nothing to do with Naomi or basketball. I'm not playing games with her or you. The two exchanged silly smirks, sparking his ire. Better to leave her out of the discussion and somehow rein the boys into cooperation. You wanted to do your own thing, take food into the game room, getting the controllers greasy. Here at Westside, we do our best to live at peace with each other. For peace, we need order and teamwork. My job requires that I act as a reputable role model, and teach you ways to grow into courteous men, functioning well in society. Miguel puffed his chest. If you're such a wonderful role model, what were you doing with your girlfriend behind the fence? Yeah, Charlie added. Hoping for a friendship between these two proved regrettable. What brought on their attitudes? David's leadership role of his flock left no room for their belittling or making their own rules. Was Charlie's termination driving a rebellion against the system? If so, David might sign up, but why attack him? He tried to stop the county workers' decision, and Charlie knew that. Miguel's smug grin spread. What took so long? Did your tongues get tangled? He knocked fists with Charlie. David stood, swallowing a rising fury laced with uncertainty over how to reach these two. Sounds like you think pretty low of us, and that strikes me as unfair. He fought for an even tone. First, Naomi is not my girlfriend,